Yasuke, the enigmatic African samurai of the Sengoku period, remains one of the most fascinating and mysterious figures in Japanese history. Originally arriving in Japan as a servant to Jesuit missionaries, Yasuke's sheer physical stature and remarkable strength would catch the attention of Oda Nobunaga, the unofficial ruler of Japan. And Yasuke would rise from obscurity to one of Nobunaga's most favored retainers, as well as one of just a handful of foreign-borns to reach the prestigious status of samurai. However, Yasuke's time in Japan would ultimately be marked by both glory and tragedy, as his fate became entwined with the downfall of his master. But how did Yasuke survive an incident where so many others perished? And what became of this foreign samurai after the fall of Oda Nobunaga? To answer these questions, we must explore the historical records and chronicles that document Yasuke's rise, his fateful last battle, and the mysteries surrounding his final years. But before we begin, don't forget, if you want to find out more about the deaths of some of history's greatest figures, then subscribe to my channel Historical Exit. The precise details of Yasuke's early life are unfortunately largely unknown and highly speculative, with most modern historians in agreement of the fact that Yasuke may have been potentially captured from one of the East African countries controlled by the Portuguese Empire and born somewhere between the years 1555 to 1566. The Portuguese Empire by this time was already well established across the Indian Ocean trade network, and they were keen to expand their endeavors further into East Asia, and it is believed that Yasuke arrived on the shores of Japan in 1579, either as the slave or bodyguard of Jesuit missionary Alessandro Valignano, a high-ranking ecclesiastical official entrusted with overseeing Portuguese missionary activities across the region. And 2 years after their arrival in Japan, in the year 1581, Valignano and his retinue, including Yasuke, would travel to Kyoto, where the Jesuit priests hoped to strengthen their influence amongst Japan's ruling elite, either through conversion or trade agreements. Yasuke's imposing stature, reported to be over 6 shaku, roughly 6 feet in height, coupled with his black complexion, would eventually reach the ears of Oda Nobunaga, and he would summon Yasuke to his court to witness this alien and unique specimen for himself. And of course, Yasuke's dark skin and towering height would have immediately garnered the attention of all in Kyoto, as the townsfolk would most likely have never seen a black person before, as exposure to non-Japanese individuals for common folk would have been exceedingly rare in the best of cases. And this fact is vividly highlighted to us by Jesuit chronicler Louis Foix, who comments in his work, History of Japan, the great level of awe and spectacle that would ensue as local villagers crowded around Yasuke to catch a better glimpse of the black foreigner. And Louis even states that several individuals will be crushed and killed in the ensuing chaos of the mob. After finally getting past the hordes of villagers trying to catch a glimpse of him, Yasuke would at last have an audience with Oda Nobunaga, with the daimyo purportedly being unable to believe his eyes and convinced that the black skin of Yasuke must just be painted on. But as his slaves washed the body and arms of Yasuke, his skin became even darker, convincing the stunned ruler of Japan that he was indeed looking at a black-skinned individual. Nobunaga was so entranced by the distinctive look of Yasuke that he demanded Valignano to allow Yasuke to enter his service and become one of his retainers. Additionally, it is during this fateful encounter that Nobunaga would give his new retainer the Japanese name of Yasuke, with his true African name being lost to the sands of time and completely forgotten by history. Nonetheless, it would appear that Nobunaga would quickly become very fond of Yasuke, and his prestige would continue to grow, with Yasuke being given many honors such as a residence, a stipend, and the right to bear arms, an honor which was reserved exclusively for the samurai class. Yasuke would serve Nobunaga in various roles, but he would serve primarily as his bodyguard, as it has been documented that alongside his great martial prowess, Yasuke also possessed the strength of 10 men, a valuable asset for Nobunaga indeed. And he would go to great lengths to ensure that Yasuke was well looked after and protected at all times. The next year or so of Yasuke's life remains quite ambiguous, but it is with a high degree of certainty that we can suspect that Yasuke would have participated in Nobunaga's campaigns against enemy daimyos such as the Takeda clan and the last remnants of the rebellious Buddhist warrior monks known as the Iko-Iki. Having a powerful and distinct warrior such as Yasuke in his army would have been a great moral boost for Nobunaga's soldiers and would have aided Yasuke in honing his skills in the samurai way of combat, and also assist Yasuke in earning the respect and admiration of his peers. But it would be on June 21st, 1582 that Yasuke's most famous military engagement would occur, as on this pivotal day, Nobunaga would be betrayed by his general Akechi Mitsuhide, a samurai who Nobunaga trusted implicitly and relied on greatly. Such a betrayal would have caught Nobunaga and his household guard, including Yasuke, completely off guard, as during this fateful day Nobunaga had been staying at Honnō-ji, a temple in Kyoto, where he had brought only a small contingent of his forces with him for a personal tea ceremony. Honnō-ji was a temple he frequented regularly, and he was certain of his safety and security in the region, hence why Nobunaga is reported to have had with him a maximum retinue of 150 individuals. However, the forces of Akechi Mitsuhide would be about 13,000 strong, and when they attacked the poorly defended temple in a surprise attack, many, including Nobunaga, who committed seppuku, would perish in the battle. However, Yasuke was not one of these casualties, and after fighting bravely alongside the Nobunaga loyalists, he would somehow manage to escape the onslaught at the Honnō-ji temple and regroup with Oda Nobunaga's heir, Oda Nobutada, at Nijo Castle, where Nobutada was preparing for a final stand against Mitsuhide's rebellious forces. Shortly thereafter, Yasuke and the Oda forces would find themselves besieged and outnumbered by the forces of Mitsuhide, and although Nobutada and Yasuke would fight fiercely, the castle would eventually be overrun, resulting in Oda Nobutada also committing seppuku and Yasuke being captured by enemy soldiers. And when Yasuke was presented to Akechi Mitsuhide, the traitorous general, he surprisingly decided to let Yasuke go free and be returned to the Jesuit priests, rather than be immediately executed as was the case for all of the other Oda generals and samurai that had been captured. The reasons for why Yasuke was released rather than executed are up for debate, but the most commonly held beliefs are that Akechi Mitsuhide did not consider him to be Japanese and therefore not susceptible to Japanese law or samurai warrior codes. Other plausible discourses are that Mitsuhide did not want to anger the Jesuits whom he relied on for trade and political purposes by killing one of their associates, and a final theory states that Mitsuhide considered Yasuke more beast than a warrior and did not view him as a threat and therefore had no qualms or concerns about sparing his life. Whatever Mitsuhide's true intentions may have been, it is certain that Yasuke did not perish at the events of Honnō-ji or Nijo Castle, as Jesuit priest Louis Freud would write in his historical document, The History of Japan, that he was grateful to God that Yasuke had not perished at the Battle of Honnō-ji, which had occurred 5 months earlier. Therefore, with a contemporary source stating the presence of Yasuke in Kyoto months after Nobunaga's death, we can ascertain that Yasuke most certainly did not perish in battle against Mitsuhide or his forces. But how exactly then did this foreign and powerful warrior meet his end? Well, that is an enigmatic question with no clear answer, as Yasuke vanishes from the historical record after this point, so all we have for now are best guesses and plausible discourses. Popular theories suggest that Yasuke may have lived out his days with the Jesuits in Kyoto, perhaps as a bodyguard or a servant. Alternatively, it is also possible he may have fought as a samurai for another daimyo and perished in battle. Or he may have left Japan altogether and returned to Africa or another country. So, 3 very different discourses with the plausibility of each of these theories being highly questionable at best. But until new historical or archaeological evidence is discovered, the question of how exactly Yasuke died will forever remain a mystery. But in my opinion, I believe that he may have lived with the Jesuits before eventually succumbing to natural causes, as I'm fairly certain we would have some more historical evidence of Yasuke's deeds if he went on to fight for another warlord or daimyo. So although we may never have a conclusive answer to how Yasuke died, we do know that his impact on Japanese history and even world history is undeniable, forever being remembered as the first black samurai and one of the few foreigners who were able to rise to the pinnacle of Japanese society. So I hope you found this video on Yasuke's life to be interesting, and I know it is a bit different from my usual content as the channel focuses primarily on the deaths of various historical figures and the mystery or circumstances surrounding their passing. But with the new Assassin's Creed game getting released focusing on Yasuke, I thought now would be a good time to make sure the true story of Yasuke was explored rather than what we may get depicted by Ubisoft in their latest video game. But if you did find this video to be interesting, please do like and share it with others. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to my channel, Historical Exits, so you can find out more about the deaths of some of history's greatest figures. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye.